Welcome to the Everybody Hates Church podcast. At the intersection of church and culture is all of us. With endless posts, opinions, and information, this podcast is the safe space to decode it all while exploring why everybody hates church.
I appreciate the comment. Frustration, I think, and I hope that you guys will tackle it one day, it seems like church has become more entertainment-centered than sound doctrine.
Sure.
And I feel like this, if nowhere else, this needs to be the place where sound doctrine resides, not entertainment. And it seems like the congregation tends to preacher shop based on who entertains the most.
Did you say preacher shop?
Preacher shop.
Preacher shop.
Wow.
So it's one of those things. It's like as you get into teaching spaces, it's like, are you listening to me to hear what the word says, or are you listening to me to be entertained? It's like you talk to people and it's like, I don't feel fed. Like, what? So that's just one of my frustrations.
Oh man.
Wow.
Oh man. And so, bro, man, thank you for that.
We talked about that too.
So before you pass the mic, can you just a little bit more of what you mean by for entertainment or entertainment based?
So you get in the circles and it's like, okay, so I was talking to a friend and it's like, man, you got to go here. And it's like, okay, what do you like about it? Oh, man, if the preaching's good, the this is that, the this is good, the this is that. I said, oh, okay, but they talked about last week. Man, I can't even tell you, bro.
Wow.
And it's like, you just made a case about being fed and this is the place where you're growing and you don't remember what you talked about last week. But it's all about the worship or the preaching style and this and that. Now, I think you mentioned something years ago, Dr. Howard Hendricks, and correct me, a mist in the pulpit is like a fog in the pew.
Dr. Howard Hendricks is one of my favorite professors at Dallas Seminary, legendary professor. He said a mist in the pulpit is a fog in the pew. That basically means if it's a little unclear up here, it's really unclear out there.
Right.
And
So I know that preachers and things need to have personality, you need to have stage presence, so forth like that, but, especially when you look on TV, it seems to be more of a drive to entertainment value, shock value, hieroglyphics and all that, especially in the youth context as well.
Sure.
That's where it really explodes. That's where part of my frustration comes from. And so just any thoughts on that?
Man, that's so good. So I wrestled there, Alexander, and I think one of the reasons I wrestle is the word entertainment at its basis, in its base form, simply means to hold one's attention. And so Mark Batterson says it's a sin to be boring with the Bible, right? And so there is that part of it, I think, where there are things that we do that simply hold people's attention. And so the question for me is, I don't believe that you have to make a decision between the two. I don't feel like I have to make a decision between holding someone's attention and giving them sound doctrine. The hope is that I hold their attention long enough to give them sound doctrine so they haven't tuned me out 3 minutes into this message, right? And I got to be careful with how I do that. And how we hold people's attention changes year by year, let alone generation by generation. And so you may notice, if you came to the Heights 10 years ago, Sanctuary didn't look like this. We didn't have all these pretty lights, and we got a fog machine over there, and we turn the lights down in worship on Sundays, and people have come in and said, "Is this church or a concert? Is this church or a club?" And no, it's church. It's worship. We've created a different environment for the same reason that generations before us had stained glass windows. It's pretty, right? The question is, does the aesthetic lean us into a worship experience with God or distract us from a worship experience with God? And some of that is on us and how we prepare the worship moment. Some of that is on whoever walks in and what their expectations are when they get there.
Can I just add one more thing?
Yeah.
So growing up, I remember my father every child initially thinks church is boring.
Mm-hmm.
But I know one of the things I got from my father is a sense of discipline that,
Yeah.
hey, relax.
Right.
I'm not going to say what he told me, but there was some drive to discipline rather than
Sure.
depending on the methodology of the preacher.
Absolutely.
And so, I guess from a pastor point of view, do you feel a sense that is there rationale to encourage them to be disciplined, churchgoers, disciplined worshipers, or is that something you take upon yourself that if they don't like it, it's my fault?
Oh, no, I never take that upon myself. No. I've learned, and I've been doing this for a little over a decade, I've learned that people will do what people do. At the end of the day, people will do what people do. And so I don't take upon myself the responsibility if somebody doesn't like what happens here. Because they'll trip over 4 churches on their way home. Hopefully one of them reaches them in a manner that speaks to them. What I also have decided, though, is that I'm not going to decide that there's something wrong with somebody who likes pretty things or likes a worship experience where the people actually know how to sing. Or I believe it's okay for us to give an excellent experience when people come to church. Not just okay, I believe it's a responsibility that we hold. That if we're going to claim the name of Jesus, that we're going to do this with excellence, because I don't want to sign Jesus' name at the bottom of some stuff that doesn't sound good, doesn't look good, doesn't come across well, doesn't communicate well, because I won't get to communicate the gospel if they've turned me off already. And so there's that part of it where we have to make a decision and inspect what we do so that we do it well. Now, I will say this, though. I feel...
Don't preach,
feel
Dr. Manning.
I know. I know we got to move. I do feel the pressure, though, of a culture that relies on sound bites. And, some of the reasons why the more popular preachers are the popular preachers is probably not because they're preaching a really good 35, 40-minute sermon, but because they said something really good in a 60-second clip that got cut up and put on Instagram. And so I do feel that pressure. It's self-inflicted because I'm scrolling through Instagram like, how come I don't have 70,000 followers? It's like, and so... that is self-inflicted pressure that I feel, but when that goes away when I go to my study, because I have a responsibility to shepherd the people that attend this church more than I have the responsibility to say something really good for a mass audience on Instagram. And if I have to choose between the two, I'm going to choose the people that God has called me to shepherd every time.
Yeah, that's good. Great question.
Hey, everybody. I'm here at Life and Legacy Counselors with my estate attorney, Miss Amy Griffin. Amy, could you tell us why it's so important for us to think generationally about our wealth?
Yes, it's about strategically planning. As the word says, that we are supposed to plan for our children's children.
Mm-hmm.
So as we are able to build, we're able to create greatness and opportunity for our children, our community to grow.
Amy is my estate attorney. She has helped me and my family think generationally about not just how much money we make now, but how we make sure that we protect our money and pass our money on to generations. Amy, how can we get in contact with you?
Easily go to our website at yourestateplanningattorney.com or call us at 855-574-8481.
Thank you so much for being a part of the Everybody Hates Church podcast family, and you reach out to Amy today.
Okay.
Yes, Mrs. Tyler.
All right. So there was a season where I started to have this love-hate relationship with church.
Mm-hmm.
And it was due to seeing an unhealthy way that church staff was treated. You know, my husband for years served on various church staffs, and I served in leadership and teams and things of that nature. I would love to see some conversation around I would love to see some conversation around cultivating healthy church staff and team members, because oftentimes there seems to be, these are the people that they get to be up close. They get to see the ins and outs of church, but a lot of them may end up struggling with the church, or even hating the church after a while because of various reasons, and we could go down the line of different reasons. And so I would love to see some conversation around cultivating that healthy church culture.
Yeah.
That's so hard, because so I come from a mega church environment, and so I was cultivated in a mega church environment. And one of the hardest things to do when you become a machine is to remember that the cogs of that machine are humans. And the people, particularly staff, become the method by which we minister to the masses, and then we forget that somebody got to minister to us. And you know, our church has not become mega, but we have staff, we have leaders, and I am by nature an A-type choleric personality. I get stuff done naturally. That's what I do. One of the things I had to learn as a pastor is, all right, before we talk about stuff, let's talk about you. Because we are not well if you are not well. And so let's check. Sometimes our leaders get on their nerves. They be like, we be trying to do stuff, and pastor want us to check in and see how everything is, and we just trying to get this meeting over and go home. But it's something you have to be intentional about working into your culture. Self-care, staff care, people care is something you have to work into your culture, because if you don't, the prize, the product, the event being successful, the numbers, the data, the statistics become the driver, and we'll leave people in the wake of reaching the goals that we're shooting for. And we just gotta be, and it's not easy. It's not easy. It takes work. It takes as much work as it takes to do stuff as a church. It takes just as much work, if not more, to take care of the people that do the stuff. And so you just have to be purposeful about it. And sometimes it's super hard, and sometimes we get blinded by the lights, and sometimes we're working so hard to get on that Outreach Magazine fastest growing church list that we forget that it took a lot of people to really make success happen.
So real fast, the young lady with the glasses right there. Thank you.
Asia.
Hi. I think that there's just a general lack of interest in Gen Z. I'm Gen Z.
Hey.
And I think that there's a lot of conversation about my generation without actually investing the time in getting to know what we are interested in, what we're afraid of. Gen Z is not afraid to die. That's not like a thing. I think that if anything, we're afraid to live because there are not any resources that we're being afforded, or any type of wisdom or tangible heirlooms that give us a reverence for something that came before us. Everything is just so disposable now, and we're not taught to invite that language of sustainability or reliability, because everything is just like, well, you guys are just so fleeting, everything. And it's like just speaking seeds of death into the community.
Wow.
and then confused why no one's showing up to church. And it's like, you've already killed something before it could even have a safe place to grow. And I think that just inviting voices onto the show or allowing for topics that would garner the interest of Gen Z onto a larger platform so that we're not so ostracized, or the topics that we're interested in are not like, oh, well, that's so secular. And it's like, whatever, like, like it's not secular or sacred, but you know, who are you submitting to in the secular space, in the sacred space? And so like, I just want people to be more interested in what we're interested in, because you're asking us to do the same thing. But out of a respect for kind of authority, we're kind of, we're bullied into it a little bit. And I think that the reason that so many people are being discipled outside of the church or just outside of the fellowship is just because that there's community elsewhere that is deep, it's deeply rooted, it's sustainable, they have roots in that community. You can't tell me that I can't identify myself in this community because we have history here.
Absolutely.
You know, and so just a language of sustainability that I think that needs to be a little bit, we need to demystify it a little bit more.
That's
so
good,
that,
Asia.
you know, we could be introduced.
That's so good. That's so good. You know what I've learned, not just from research, but knowing dope Gen Z people like you, is Gen Z is unlike millennials. Unlike you guys are unlike us in this. We got so jaded by spiritual stuff. And I say us, I mean millennials. We got so jaded by spiritual stuff that we retreated. And then you guys came along and didn't have what we had that made us jaded. And so now statistics are showing that Gen Z is so much more interested in spiritual things than millennials even were. But the spaces where Gen Z can engage have been pretty much cut off because millennials retreated, which means they weren't holding the door for Gen Z. And Gen X was jaded because baby boomers didn't pass the baton to them until they were 60. And so and so really Gen Z is in such, your generation is in such a position to take reins and lead the way and have a, am I right? Just this desire to be discipled by somebody who got some sense.
Yeah, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, don't just be saying anything. Like, you allow for your language of God to rest in the vastness of God without feeling like you're deserting your salvation. Like, if I ask you, oh, well, then is it possible that God operates like this? And you get so scared because you've never considered it before. And instead you push me into this box that's like, no, that's not how God can operate. But you just told me he was omniscient. So what do you mean he can't operate like this? Like, can you at least be willing to be flexible? And sometimes it might be silly putty where it is a little tense. Sometimes it's like slime and it's just all over the place. But like, at least be willing to engage with me with the same level of flexibility that you say you have, or that the local church is offering me, without making me feel like I'm like a heretic and I'm a false teacher because I'm trying to figure out what this looks like. If I'm committed to the grand narrative of Scripture of Jesus being the Son of God, of him dying, raising, at least give me the space to explore what that looks like and how I can navigate as the hand and feet of the kingdom without making me feel like I have to be like an elder at age 30. Like, you know what I mean? So
That's good. It's funny, you know, I talk to a lot of Gen Z, and one of the things that I've heard or had a conversation about, that God has a lot more patience for our sanctification than the local church often does. Right? And I think that's a big problem, because we are so afraid of people thinking or not knowing something, right? for us to engage, because then it's because a lot of us are struggling with our own faith. So we think your question is going to make us doubt what we have. So really the problem is our spiritual maturity, right? But we project that on Gen Z, and say, no, you guys are just spiritually immature because you are trying to learn, right? One of the things, for me, I didn't grow up in a church. And I used to envy people that did, like, man, if I had spiritual parents, if I would have avoided all this nonsense, right? But me coming in, I had this philosophy that I still kind of live by, is that evidence matters to God, right? I tell people all the time, if it wasn't for Jesus Christ, I would be an atheist, because Jesus is literally the evidence that God exists, right? So for me, when I started coming to church, I only went to Bible study. I barely went to church on Sunday because it felt like robots. It felt like, oh, y'all just get up when they tell you to get up. You just sit down when you get up. So I questioned everything. Like, I had a million questions, and most of the people in the church that are seasoned and deacons and all this stuff, they hated that. They thought I was being rebellious. They thought I was being everything. I did except for curious for the word, right? That I actually want to get this right. Sure. So I think that's so much of Gen Z too. They want to get it right, but they're not going to let you just tell them anything.
They're not going to just let you tell you that. I mean, they get that from us, millennials, honestly. But the reality is, when I was growing up in church, all I was exposed to was Jesus. Y'all, we many of us have this story. It's like, oh yeah, I grew up and I went to church every day, and they had me in church all day Sunday, and it's like, and so our primary exposure was the Bible for many of us, and particularly the generations before us. But younger millennials and Gen Z have parents that said stuff like, I'm going to let my children decide for themselves, and I'm not going to force my religion on them, and I'm not going to make them go to church. But make them children go to church. But the result of that is, okay, now there's room for more influence. Sure. And so I love Jesus and I burn sage. I love Jesus, but I pray with crystals in my hand. I love Jesus, but I get
taking me up too.
Right. Yeah. I pray to Jesus and my ancestors. And so there's so much more. There's so many more options. Yeah. There's so much more. There's so much more that goes under the umbrella of what we would call theology, the study of God. For so many of us who in the African American community who grew up in church, it was only this. And so we didn't grow up allowed to have questions outside of, the best we got was horoscope. Should I read my horoscope or not, right? But now there's so much, and now we got a whole generation that's coming to us saying, okay, by what authority do you teach this? Yeah. And we have to be willing and able. We have to be seasoned believers of all generations. Yeah. We have to be biblically literate enough to answer these questions. Yeah. We have to be students of the word, so that we don't get scared. Yeah. When one of our children or grandchildren says, well, why can't I burn sage? Sure. Yeah. If you don't have an answer for it, they're going to dismiss you as somebody who's ignorant.
Yeah. And if you're not willing to have that conversation,
you're not willing to have the conversation.
That's even worse. They're like, I guess I'm just going to figure it out myself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know where they're going to find out?
Yeah.
YouTube.
On TikTok and on YouTube. Yeah, so thank you. I know somebody else had a question, but we kind of.
Yeah, we're not trying to keep y'all here all night. Right. So we still got one more.
Yeah, right? So clap it up for Dr. Daniel.